Hello, Cam followers. It's Thursday, it's 7:30 p.m. and I am very, very happy to have the lovely Dan O'Neill back. He's been with us before and we had an amazing live because what we're going to be referring to tonight is pretty hot off the press. It's a completely new way for us to really talk with confidence about the diseases that we're seeing, the prevalence, the breed predispositions, etc., because of the work that Dan and his team are doing. So last Facebook Live was incredible. This one is going to be better. But before we start, I'm just going to say thank you to our major sponsor this year. We really wouldn't be here without them. I can tell you that because I do the accounts. Thank God for Big Barker for seeing that Cam is a real essential part for welfare, owner support, etc. So they are sponsoring us for 2022. And we're comfortable to do that because we work on an evidence-based principle. And this is the only company that I know of that has put their bed through a clinical trial. So it was a pilot study run by the University of Pennsylvania. And they were looking at whether they could actually market the bed to have mobility benefits, pain relieving aspects to it, improving quality of life. And it came up trumps in their pilot study. So thank you so much for actually taking the time to do that. It's really important work. So now let me introduce the man himself, Dan O'Neill. It's great to have you here. And please tell everybody about you and what you do so they can be absolutely blown away by the work.
Oh, wow, that's very kind. And I love the breeds on the advertisement you were just showing. So I think it teases up nicely for some of the conversations about osteoarthritis later on. So thank you very much, Hannah, for inviting me along. So I'm Dan O'Neill. I'm essentially a first opinion practitioner. I was in practice for 20 years. And then for the last 10 years, I've moved from treating animals one by one in general practice to treating animals at a population level at the Royal Veterinary College. I co-lead the VetCompass Programme there. My background is when I left practice, I did a master's and then a PhD developing VetCompass, and I've stayed on at the RVC since. I'm now Associate Professor of Companion Animal Epidemiology.
Amazing.
But that's kind of all academic stuff. I guess the real stuff is who we are, not who we describe ourselves academically. And I think I would describe myself as somebody who's just motivated to use evidence to make animals' lives better. And even if we just chip away at that at a population level, a very small change, it was like the British cycling team years ago when they used to go for incremental change, 0.5% or a 1% gain. If you keep getting those small gains, then suddenly you go from a mediocre team to an Olympic gold team. So really that's what we want with our animals. We want to go to the Olympic gold standard of health.
Yes, and that is what we're going to be kind of alluding to throughout this. And I just have to say, you're so humble. You're amazing. You know, Dan O'Neill's on cam. Our title tonight seemed a little bit vague because we wanted the ability to drift. We wanted to be able to turn this into a bit more of a discussion. We wanted to highlight some other welfare issues that are highly linked with osteoarthritis prevalence, breed predispositions, etc. So the title is Wielding Social Power to Improve Welfare Issues. And the hope is that you guys go away with a really different way of thinking about things. And we want you to talk to other people because we want a ripple effect from this. Because the truth is, you guys are consumers. You are the people that have the ability to influence change. And what you do and how you behave and is really going to be making the difference. So when we start bringing up things that we want you to think about, we don't want you to become defensive. It's very easy to. I want you to just open your mind and think about the bigger picture and think about centuries past and centuries future and the things that we could possibly do to benefit our beloved. By the way, I've got a new friend. This is Flea. Flea's joining me for the live. So there's a background purr. But I want this lovely species to go on forever with really good health, as much as I want the canine species to continue with great health. So first of all, I'm going to allow Mr. O'Neill to kind of describe osteoarthritis from his perspective, which is going to be much more of a biopsychosocial rather than just an academic about the disease, about the impact it has on the owner, and something that we were just talking about earlier. I'm going to bring it in now. Is it disease that they die with or of? And that's quite a powerful statement. So let's talk about OA. Please tell me your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's kind of a fascinating one because I've come a bit of a journey on a lot of these diseases. And we'll come back to maybe later on that thing about dying with and dying of, because I think that's absolutely huge, Hannah. It's if I'm a dog, it's actually the living with the disease is the big problem. Once I've died of it, I'm dead. I'm a dog. I'm not suffering anymore. So actually, sometimes I think maybe we focus on the wrong bit of the disease. But even over time, I keep thinking about osteoarthritis, and this now will throw you because you're obviously totally invested in osteoarthritis. But you have to question whether it is a disease or is it a syndrome, because we have so many different versions of osteoarthritis and we have so many different triggers of osteoarthritis. Is it actually even a thing, or is it an end result, a description, the body's response to some acute or chronic or repeated harms? We then have to think about osteoarthritis in terms of where it's come from. Is it related to the conformation of the dog? So then is that something we can change over time? Is it related to wear and tear? So in other words, activity, okay, we can change that as well. Or is it very strongly breed associated, like end result from tendency to elbow problems, fractures in French bulldogs? You then have the complication. This makes it even worse. And this one really blows your mind, where actually is osteoarthritis a good thing? In other words, do we want our dogs to get osteoarthritis? So we start out in life and we go through life and we have fun and we exercise and we have a great time. And then we get older and we pay a price for that on our joints. But actually, the fact that we've got to that stage of old age and osteoarthritis in a very active, healthy, fit dog that has lived a wonderful, rich life, it actually means the osteoarthritis is almost a typical or expected or natural outcome of that life. So the trick there isn't so much the osteoarthritis. The key thing from the dog's point of view is spotting it. It's all the work that you do, Hannah, in alerting owners to what signs to look out for, and then how best to manage it, different forms of pain relief, analgesia, exercise regimes. So it's hugely complex. And I guess this is probably why you've been working on this for years, and you probably will for the next forever.
It's not going to stop.
It's more complex.
It's just going to get more complex. But I just want to touch on what you were saying, in that we will quite often have people say to us, I just wish osteoarthritis didn't exist. And in many ways, that's just ridiculous. It will exist. But what we do need to do is make sure that we keep the suffering and the pain that's associated with it in check. Because you can have background disease, but you can still have good quality of life and longevity, can't you? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. There's and the trick then with that is spotting that the dog has osteoarthritis or likely to have osteoarthritis. So there are lots of dogs out there that are likely suffering, but because no one knows they're suffering, then in our world, we live in the human world, each of us in our own unique world. And if we don't know a dog is suffering, then in our world, the dog isn't suffering, and therefore there's no issue. But obviously the dog isn't in our world. The dog is living in their world and they are suffering. So this is, again, why all the stuff you're doing, Hannah, on raising awareness, helping people to spot the typical signs, that's so important. Because even before we get to managing the disease, we have to be aware it exists.
That's so true. I'm so glad that you said that, because I started thinking about it years and years ago. And I was really aware that you can't educate if people aren't aware. Why learn about something that's you're not aware of? You can't. So any kind of like education reform needs to have quite a big campaign with it that's going to make people aware. And then that led me to thinking, well, how do I make people aware? And for me, it was the fact that we weren't utilizing the truth. And that goes back to dying with, dying of. But the truth is a leading cause of euthanasia. And when in practice, I can recount hundreds of times where people have said to me, I'll do anything, I just don't want him to be in pain. That might be a road traffic accident, that might be pancreatitis, that might be, some form of trauma, whatever. I will do anything, I just don't want him to be in pain. But then they'll come in and they're, oh no, he's just getting stiff, he's just old. I'm like, but you'll do anything, but he is in pain. And I found that really hard to get my head around, how we had such a different approach. And that's acute and chronic pain, because acute is obvious, is more obvious. It's kind of obvious. Whereas chronic is very, very easy to put it down to normality. It's normal aging. So, yeah, thank you for saying about the awareness. I think that is really needed, really needed.
Is really, really key. There's a couple of words you use there that are even worth exploding. It's one of, I love even just picking one word and exploding. Use the word normal. There is a word you could explore. What the heck does normal mean? And I think a lot of us take normal as somehow being good, or that's what we must aspire to. But actually, most of the time we're talking about typical. We're just saying this is the typical scenario or typical for breed. But when we flip it and say normal, we kind of think it means the same thing, but it doesn't, because our brain now sees a totally different message. So when we say it's normal for old dogs to be stiff, well, is that really true? Is it normal? It might be typical, but in the sense that normal is good, it probably isn't good, even though it's typical. So those words are really important. The other thing you hit on there is absolutely fascinating. It's kind of like how we grow in our knowledge and our understanding and our belief. So you start off not being aware of something at all. So I have a dog and my dog is stiff. It's normal. He's old, right? And I have no awareness that the dog is in pain. And then over time, I gain some awareness that the dog is in pain. Right? Maybe a vet tells me, or a friend tells me, or I start to think, maybe he's in pain. But nothing has really changed for the dog. I'm just aware of it. You then have the perception that the pain is unacceptable. It's not normal. It might be typical. And then you almost then go to the next phase, where as a human, you start to live the life the dog has, and you start to think, actually, this is horrible. Every minute of every day, this dog is in pain, it's stiff, it's uncomfortable. And that's often when people switch on to heavy pain relief, or all the different modalities that you will teach your clients, I guess, about how to manage pain relief. So it's almost a journey. And a lot of that, you had said about educating. Even though I work in the university, I'm not sure that we should be educating people. I think we should be helping people to learn for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't unscrew the top of somebody's skull and pour the knowledge in. That's education in the classic sense. I'll just ram information at you and you soak it in. You kind of can't do that. People need to change their own mind, work their own ideas up, and then they progress to a belief that's theirs. It intrinsically belongs to them. It's not Hannah's belief. It's their belief. Now they'll act on it and they'll hold it dear. So I think even in that,
cool.
So much.
Well, this is really cool that you're saying belief, because tonight we're trying to start tapping into people's beliefs that they're going to really strongly believe in and adhere to and spread the word about. Because I must admit, I never really thought about breeds until I understood OA more. You do just think it's people's preference. They have different aspects that give them advantages in different areas of their companionship with us, be it hunting, agility, their companionship. They sleep a lot, they play a lot. They have different aspects to them that we choose, we select. But I never really kind of saw the reverse of that. There are aspects to them that we create that maybe they don't want. And this is when I want people to start just questioning. Look at the breeds around you. Is it their desire to be like that, or is it our desire? So let's stay with OA to start with, because I want you to share figures about prevalence, breed predispositions, and we're going to stick to that, because a lot of people that follow CAM sadly will lose their dog. You know, a lot of people that join CAM are doing it in the later stages of their dog's lives because they've not recognized the signs, because they weren't aware, because it's considered normal for a dog to get old and stiff. And unfortunately, they get, you know, the advice, etc., and the support later in their journey. So many of these people then have a decision of, do they stay with us, or do they leave because they no longer have their companion with OA? But many of them will say to us, I need to make sure I don't go down this journey again. I don't want to have to experience what I've just been through, because it's such an emotionally debilitating disease for the owner as much as it is difficult for the dog. And by selecting a breed, it's certainly one step in the right direction to reducing your risk of getting a dog with early onset arthritis, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so again, like, you've almost covered the thesis in that couple of sentences, Hannah. It's incredible how much you're cramming into these sentences. So let's start, and we'll work our way through that process. So from with an osteoarthritis context in mind, right? So breeds. So dogs started to evolve 20 million years ago, between 10 and 20 million years ago. And over 10 and 20 million years, nature evolved dogs to their optimal health. So when we look at dogs in the wild, wolves, coyotes, dingoes, foxes, if you drop down from Mars and you looked at all those variations of dogs, you would say, well, kind of all the same thing. They all have a similar size of shape of head, and they all have a tail and similar kind of structure, right? And then maybe 10,000 years ago, dogs started to domesticate themselves, perhaps coming around humans, easy source of food. But then 150 years ago in Victorian England, something amazing happened. And that was the invention, and I use the word correctly, invention of the breed concept. Before that, there were types of dogs that were based on different functions. So a retriever was a dog that retrieved. But there was lots of different types of retrievers. There might be little ones, tall ones, whatever. They were just a dog that retrieved. But then we invented breeds with a view to showing dogs, and we needed to have a fixed description of what each breed was, first of all. And secondly, we needed the breeds to be very distinct in how they looked, so we could recognize them apart from each other. And that's wonderful from a human point of view. It's what we do all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's cars or bicycles or food. It's what we do as humans. We want variation, and we want each variant within the variation to be distinct. We need to be able to tell it apart. Again, everyone has a different phone, perhaps. But we need to be able to say, mine is an iPhone, but more than that, it's an iPhone 10. More than that, it's rose gold. Yeah. So this is where we go as humans, and that's fine. And there's no point fighting that. And coming with all this breed invention came extra care and love and bonding with these dogs, because we bought into the concept. And that's the history of it, and it's fine.
I'm shocked. It was only 150 years ago. I'm still reveling in that, and I never see. This is what I mean. My belief is being affected. I would have thought it was a lot longer than that, but seriously.
Yeah, it's really weird, because it was really all based around the showing concept. So these dogs, when you look back in time, you'll see dogs that look like our current breeds in pictures. But as a distinct breed, saying this is the breed standard, this is what the breed looks like and must look like, and we must breed all the dogs towards this exact description, that concept was born in late Victorian times, late 1800s. And in some senses, it's really, really, really useful, because when you get a breed, you kind of get what you know you're going to get. Puppies pretty much kind of all look the same. They're just all adorable. But when you buy a puppy and you know it's of breed X, you can pretty well guarantee what it's going to grow up to look like.
That's a really good point, isn't it? Can you imagine before the Victorians, you go and you're like, don't know what pig, this is going to be fun. Because they all look like guinea pigs, really, when they're born, don't they?
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with guinea pigs. We like guinea pigs as well.
Yeah. I've had a friend who got sold. Well, she was the vet in charge of a case where someone came in and said, my puppy's not growing, and they'd been sold guinea pig.
Oh, you see, that's now the reverse to what used to happen, because what used to happen is you would go and you would buy, a bag full of little piglets, because they were farm animals. and in the middle of them, there'd be a puppy. So the expression came about, you were sold a pup.
No!
Yeah, you see, you're learning something every day.
I am. I like this.
So instead of being sold a pup, they were sold a guinea pig, were they?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
We should not tangent, but have you seen the one of the ferret where they backcombed it and sold it on as a bichon frise?
No way.
Check it out online.
Okay. It's a weird world. Or actually, it's probably not the world that's weird. I think it's us as species.
Yeah. We are. So, okay, they've only actually been this really big breed development drive for the last 150 years. And we really pushed them into different categories and pushed hard to make them really distinct.
Yeah, and that in itself isn't a problem. So much of this isn't a problem. It's actually, in some respects, there's over time as well, I've learned to think not so much in black and white, good, bad, but that everything is complex, and it depends what perspectives you're looking at things from. So the whole breed concept is actually very useful because it gives us lots of predictability. And as humans, it gives us the power to choose what sort of dog we want to fit whatever niche that we want to fit. So, and even if breeds disappear tomorrow, in another 20 or 30 years ago, following after that, they'd be back again because it's what we do, right? We don't want amorphous grey mush. We don't eat it on plates in front of us. We don't drive around in it. We don't live in it. We don't wear it. We all want what we deem to be recognizable and unique and somehow special to us. And more importantly, from a psychological point of view, we want it to represent us. So by having this smart car or this smartphone or wearing these smart clothes, somehow we're telling a story we want to project about ourselves. And similarly with the dogs we own. So all of that's absolutely fine, right? And we have these breeds. The issue really is kind of a growing issue in the last decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, where it's our awareness is growing that some of these breeds have extreme characteristics that are associated with poor health. And it's almost a journey that I said earlier about the lack of awareness, going to awareness, then you go to perception where you actually acknowledge it and you feel it, and then you go to lived experience. That's where a lot of people end up after owning a dog with an extreme breed. It's the comment you made earlier. I've had the dog with severe osteoarthritis. I've now gone through well, I never knew that happened, to, oh, actually, no, it exists, to perception, my dog has it, to then actually living for the last 2, 3, 4 years of its life with the dog in severe and recurring remitting pain. That's the lived experience, and I never want to go through it again. So we've kind of gone through that, and it's where a lot of people with extreme breeds end up. They just end up thinking, I'm never doing this again. But even their testimony to other people won't necessarily overcome a drive to own a certain type of dog that's driven by other factors, emotional factors, like social media, which is why celebrities and advertising companies are so powerful in driving the sort of breeds we own. But equally, they could be so powerful in driving us towards healthier and more naturally, innately healthy breeds as well. So this it's not all doom and gloom. In fact, this is really, really positive because humans love dogs. And oddly, paradoxically, the owners of the extreme breeds often are much more bonded with them. Peter Sando did a lovely paper showing that actually the breeds that were less healthy almost had more bonded owners because somehow we felt their pain, and maybe somehow intrinsically we felt a responsibility for that pain.
Yes.
So it is very, very strange. But anyway, that's kind of the breed story, and I think breeds are great. And even at the moment, there is a push against breeds.
I do need to show you this. This is lovely. I really love what someone's just written. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I can just see that.
I feel that every day. I do ask you that. I love that. I absolutely love that. You've got the right sense of humor, lady. Yes.
I'm assuming, Diane, out there, that you had the Huskies before Game of Thrones.
I'm sure she'll let us know.
Yeah.
So bringing this back to the breed predisposition, because a lot of people here are like, whoa, this is arthritis. Bring that back into the context of joint health. Breed predispositions to developmental joint disease, which we know is the leading cause of OA in canines. And that's when I first started finding out about your work. So recite that for us.
Yeah, well, I mean, the papers are all available, but the background is that the project I work on is called VetCompass. Now, VetCompass is a concept, and the concept is that people with animals love their animals and they go and they seek veterinary care. And the vets love animals and they examine them and they record all the information about the animals on their computer system. So the breed and the date of birth and the body weight and the color, etc. And also the free text with all the clinical notes and the treatment that's given. So essentially what we're doing within VetCompass is collecting that anonymized information from hundreds, thousands now of veterinary practices right across the UK, putting it into a single database, and then our researchers, and we have lots of collaborative researchers, then just go exploring the data to answer various different research questions. So essentially, we're now pulling out information that has always been present, but no one had ever managed to put it into a single database and set it up for research. So,
how did you do that? Was that because do you work with a specific programming provider, management software that were like, actually, yeah, we can work with you? How do you manage to do it?
It's not like that at all. So essentially, there's about 30 different computer systems in the veterinary world, some of them small, some of them very large. But data is data. It doesn't really matter which system. They format it slightly differently, US dates versus UK dates, the width of the fields, etc. But essentially, data is data. So we develop queries that just pull certain data fields. So the species and the breed and the date of birth, no fields that contain any identifiers of humans, just the animal-related fields. You pull them from all the different computer systems, and then it goes through a processing system. The IT guys have built this, where it just reformats them to our standard format. So in other words, you turn all of those different computer system feeds into essentially a single format. And then that format goes into the database.
Right.
So it's quite clever. I don't do any of that. I can barely turn on a calculator, but we have some pretty clever IT guys that deal with all of that.
Yeah. Okay, so we have access to this, and I think this gives us a really good chance to bring in how powerful this data is comparative to the data that we often handle. And how many thousands of dogs do you think that you have access to?
So at the moment in the UK, so I started my PhD in 2010. So we've been collecting data since 2010. At the moment in the UK, it's estimated there's about 5,000 veterinary practices, and we have 1,800 of those. So about 30% of all UK vet practices feeding in data. And those data come in every day or every night, actually, when the computers are kind of at their quietest. To date, those data have accumulated information on just over 20 million animals. About half of them are dogs, so about 10 million dogs. So the database is pretty huge. And that gives us about 200 million clinical notes, and it gives us just over 500 million lines of treatment. So a treatment would be a drug that's sold, or a bag of food, or a flea treatment. So when we're saying big data, when you're over 500 million items just on the treatment field, that's pretty big data.
That's massive data.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna bring it into context for people. It's a completely different data set, because you're doing reflective data collection, aren't you? You're not influencing your data, you're not manipulating it, you're reading it. So clinical trials are very different. We are creating a situation and trying to find an answer by controlling, structuring, comparative. And that's a very active process. There's huge amounts of litigation, regulations, welfare concerns, finances, structure, statisticals, blah. It's way, way different. So the comparison that I'm about to make is poor. But quite often in the dog world, when we're looking at whether a drug or a supplement works, you'll be lucky to have a couple of hundred dogs in it. Lucky. And there's many products that we refer to that have got evidence out there on 14 dogs, less than 10. So when you look at that compared to this, we're dealing with obviously different kettle of fish, but we are dealing with a different kettle of fish. So it's very powerful.
Yeah. It's oddly, I was lecturing yesterday at RVC, and that's exactly what I was lecturing on: clinical trials, intervention studies. So it's kind of weird you fit on that one. But the no, you're exactly correct. So there's I tend to see topics that we're looking at as almost like huge, big jigsaw puzzles, and most of the time we have just a couple of pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Now, what humans do, we're brilliant at doing, is filling in the blanks. Yeah. So when you text your friend and you don't get a response, instead of saying, I didn't get a response, that's the only information I have, that's your piece of the jigsaw, you fill in the rest. And your brain starts generating this message that your friend hates you and has fallen out with you, and it must be you did X 5 years ago, and they've suddenly and that's what we do as humans. We do that all the time. So likewise with these older studies that were quite small, we get our study of the 10 dogs or the 15 dogs, and we fill in the blanks, and we create this big story about the effectiveness or whatever of the drug or the treatment. And really all we're trying to do with VetCompass is trying to put some more pieces of the jigsaw there. And it's not a standalone process. It works with all the other studies. So the surveys of the owners and the surveys of X, Y, and Z, and the intervention studies, and maybe looking at the internet. All you're trying to do is put more pieces of the jigsaw there. And it may well be the VetCompass pieces are bigger, or they're in sharper, crisper colors maybe than some of the other pieces. But it's just giving us a stronger chance that the picture we create, in other words, our belief, the picture we create in our head is a truer reflection of what's actually happening.
Yes.
And that's essentially the way that I view it. And there's no, you'd said earlier about truths, right? So I'm not even sure there is such a thing as a truth or anything is true. Epistemology is the study of knowledge, right? And there's this kind of concept of a realist ontology or epistemology, where there is a real world out there. And if we gather enough data, we can understand the real world. Well, I'm not sure that's really true. I think that it's more of a constructivist approach, where we construct the world in our head. But ideally, we would like our constructed world, our picture, to be as close as possible to what's out there. But we can never really know what's out there. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're doing with VetCompass. We're just using very large data to ask lots of different questions, to come at the question from lots of different angles. So if we're looking at osteoarthritis, we might do a study of osteoarthritis and start with the disease and then work backwards to see which breeds are predisposed. Or we might start with a breed and look at a breed, a Labrador or whatever, and see what are the top disorders within that breed. So now we're exploring osteoarthritis compared to other disorders. So we're kind of just keeping on moving around, looking at the problem from different perspectives and trying to get a better feel as to what this problem truly is, if we can ever get to a truth.
Which is amazing, because before you released the study in, I think it was February 2018, was it? Or April. And it was talking about the biggest welfare concerns in small animal practice. I had used my anecdote and my experience, my personal experiences, to come up with outlandish statements. And I would go into vet practices and teach them, tell them, do you not know? Countless dogs have been put to sleep. Where did I get that evidence? Obviously, it's a massive cause of suffering. It's the biggest cause of euthanasia. And I was saying all of this outlandish stuff based solely on my experiences. Now, yes, and luckily I had worked in lots of different practices. Once I was told I was flitty because I kept moving job. But I had worked in many different practices locally. So I did have a kind of a broad understanding, but it was still an outrageous thing to say until your work came out in 2018. So could you tell them what you did for that mind-blowing piece?
Well, it's kind of, as you're describing that, that's exactly me when I was leaving veterinary practice. I've been in practice for 22 years, actually, in 2009. And as the years went by, I found myself doing more and more and more of what you've just described.
Mm-hmm.
The more experience I got, the more convinced I became that what I knew, which I had gained from experience, not from evidence per se, was true.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be more and more adamant about it. And then I started to think, I'm just making this stuff up. I absolutely believe it's true, but I'm just making it up. I've got no external evidence, and owners would come in and ask me stuff. They'd say, well, should I castrate my dog? And I would have an answer for them because that's what I'm paid to do. And that's what they want. They'd be terribly disappointed if I said, well, I don't know, whatever you think. That's not really a helpful first opinion answer to a client who's asking you a very rudimentary question, right? That we as a profession should know. But we as a profession don't know it. However, we as a profession, every individual has their version of the answer to that question.
Yes.
Should a bitch have a season before she's neutered? Should I neuter a large bitch? Is the risk the same for a large and a small? What are the risks? Obesity, urinary incontinence, etc. So all that thing you've just described, that was exactly what motivated me to leave practice where it was dealing with animals one by one and try and work on the bigger data to try and help animals at a population level. And that includes issues like osteoarthritis, which are really common and obviously from a welfare point of view, really severe. To date, the whole idea of VetCompass, and it's with Professor Dave Broadbelt, Professor David Church, and Noel Kennedy as the team of the four of us, the four musketeers that deal with VetCompass. But the whole idea is to generate evidence that supports better decision making. What it does not do is tell anyone what to do. So the thing of slamming your fist on the counter and saying, my God, this is what we need to do, that's kind of doesn't really work. But if you provide good evidence, you can promote and support better decision-making by owners to recognize issues in their animals, to decide on the better treatment, to even decide to go to a vet in the first place, to help veterinary surgeons to better recognize disease, treat it, manage it, even if it's about making decisions on euthanasia. So that one of the studies we had done was looking at welfare scoring, and we had got a list of the top 8 disorders, most frequent disorders in dogs, and we just scored them. And we tried to measure the welfare impact at a population level by looking at the frequency of disease, by looking at the duration of disease in affected animals. So we could have a disease that was very common, but actually doesn't last very long. Yeah, so it lasts an hour or a day. Well, at a population level, that's maybe not a huge welfare impact. And then we looked at the severity. Now, when it came to all of those, the top one, when we took them all into account, was dental disease, but the next was osteoarthritis, because dental disease is more common or more commonly diagnosed. Whether it is more common, we don't know, but it's more commonly diagnosed. But osteoarthritis was top on severity and top on duration. In other words, when you've got it, you've got it. It ain't going away. And the pain and the discomfort will be there long term, which is why the campaign you're leading, Hannah, is so important, because it is just such a serious condition from a welfare point of view. And that's essentially what we were doing in that study.
But can we pause and just highlight dental disease is another problem that we hear people all the time go, well, he's still eating, it's okay. Yeah, look, I'll look at it next year at the next health check. If I have dental pain, I've got to wait a year before anybody takes it seriously. Oh my God, that's horrible, isn't it? When you think about it, dental pain that's radiating up your mandible into your ear, and it's just throbbing and feeling like it's going to burst through the bone. Dental disease is something that we really, really do need to campaign for more awareness. Back to the awareness.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And yet, when it comes to when we're saying about campaigning, part of that is actually learning more about the diseases. This is one of the other things I've pushed really hard on VetCompass for. Historically, veterinary science has focused on rare conditions and conditions when you get them that are very severe, right? Mainly because a lot of research was driven by researchers who were in referral institutions. So quite logically, the sort of conditions they would get referred to them were the very severe ones, because if they weren't very severe, why would I refer it? and often the rare ones, because if it's common and I can deal with it myself, why would I refer it? So the top conditions, so in other words, otitis externa, dental disease, periodontal disease, osteoarthritis, obesity, these sort of conditions don't tend to get referred very often because they're common. And if they're common, I'm comfortable dealing with them in first opinion practice. So historically, the veterinary literature, the evidence base, didn't focus on common or garden conditions. About 3 years ago, we published a paper on anal sac disorder in dogs. Well, when I was writing that paper, I wrote it with Anke Hendricks. When I was writing that paper with Anke and Annette Loeffler as well at RVC, we struggled to find much in the literature, if anything, on anal sac disease. But yet we treated. You were working in practice today. You know, I'll almost bet you squeeze an anal pair of.
But you're absolutely right. Like, there is so many different anal gland disorders within the anal gland. You know, the different types of anal gland content. Sometimes you get toothpaste and it's grey, and sometimes it's black and coffee granules. I don't know why. I don't know. And sometimes they're massive, and you're like, how are you okay with that? And other times they're very small but really painful. What's that about? You're absolutely right. There's so little in the literature about anal glands.
But the point is that you're in practice, and I was in practice for 20 years, and we're saying, what's that about? In other words, it's something we deal with every single day, but we actually haven't got a clue. And the reason we haven't got a clue is that nobody's done the work. Now, maybe it's not a very alluring research topic to become the world expert on anal sacs. Maybe, you know, there are some topics that are not
a dinner party story, isn't it?
Yeah, but from the dog's perspective, it is really, really, really important. Because this is very, very common and it's very uncomfortable. And you know, and those sacs, when they get impacted and then get infected, you know, they can lead to pretty horrible abscesses. But this is one of the other drives that we're pushing towards in VetCompass, is driving towards the common, but the stuff that doesn't tend to get worked up in much of the research to date. Periodontal disease is another one, just because you had mentioned dental disease. And your thing about waiting until next year for the next vaccination, for the next health check to do the dental, that's even worse than you've just said, because think about it. For you and I, if we're waiting a year, chronologically a year, and let's assume we're going to live to 100 or just under 100, that's 1% of our life. In a dog, if we're waiting chronologically a year, and let's assume the dog's going to live to roughly 10, that's 10% of its life. So actually waiting a year is like us waiting 10 years for the next time for somebody to lift your lips and say, maybe there's a little bit of a problem here.
That's powerful.
This is a numbers game, right?
Because Sales was talking about it. I can't remember it, like the disease coefficient or something, and it's the duration of disease compared to longevity as well is something else that needs to be really considered. And OA is up there because every follower of CAM now realizes that the leading cause of osteoarthritis in dogs is secondary to developmental joint disease, and they get that when they're young because it's a developmental disease. So people are always surprised when I say to them, you know, no, many of the dogs that we see have probably had some degree of discomfort for a big portion of their life. And they're like, how is that possible? Because dogs are amazing. They get on with life. They do the best that they can. Right. So now we know that we've got strong data. But what about, please just tell them about the euthanasia one, because I use that a lot in lectures, because unfortunately we've become a society where we need to have headline grabbers to get people to sit down and listen. You know, just look at the news at the moment. We've always got a headline grab at the moment. It's the trains, isn't it? Then it's been Ukraine, and there's going to be something else. It's going to be the shooting. There's the headline grabber, and I had to utilize that to try and get a foot in the door to get in people's attention. But please tell what you found.
So actually on longevity, we've done a couple of different approaches on longevity. One of the approaches is actually looking at the straight lifespan. So dogs overall, I rounded it up to 10, but dogs overall, it's 11.2 years across all dogs, right? And you can look at the straight lifespan, you can say from on average, when the dogs are born, how long will they live? Well, in a study we published, maybe 2 months ago, that was looking at lifespan, we did report that. And one of the major findings from that was that the lifespan was strongly associated with extremes of conformation.
Yeah.
So types of dogs, border collies or Jack Russells that you might not typically say have extreme conformation, they tended to live longer than the typical age. So they were up in the 12 years on average as a median lifespan. But dogs with extreme conformation, so French bulldogs or bulldogs or pugs, they were down in the 7 years bracket. So about a third less. Yeah. So the extreme conformation is associated with longevity. Now, from a human perspective, these we were doing a thing here called life tables, which I'll come back to in a second. But from a human perspective, the typical longevity or lifespan is used as a metric of overall health. So in the UK, we do a census every 3 years, and one of the things we're looking at is what's the typical age of death of people, and we break it down by different parts of the country, and that's a measure of it's a summative measure of overall health. So if we're taking into account all the different diseases we get and all the things that might make us live longer, it's a kind of a nice rounded summary. So if we have breeds that are living substantially shorter lives than other breeds, this is an indicator of some health issues. Yes. Now, obviously, dogs of different sizes tend to live different lengths of life. Smaller dogs always tend to live longer. So in the analyses, you have to take those into account. However, the extra bit we were doing in that study is kind of cool, is we were doing a life table study. And that means that we broke each dog's life down into 1 year periods. And we were then reporting how long the dog would be expected to live from each point in its life. Now, where that's important is if we say the average age of all dogs is 11.2 to death. Well, if I'm going to, the Wonderful Dogs Trust, and I'm going to rehome a dog there, and the dog is already 9, if I use that kind of summary heuristic that they're all going to die at 11.2, then I expect my dog to die in two years and 2 months, right? But the reality is it's already got to 9. So that 9-year-old dog is likely to live to maybe 12, 13, 14, because it's already got to that point. And this new life table study enables people to do that, to predict how long is left from their current age. And likewise, as a vet in practice, when somebody comes in and they say, well, he's had a good innings, right? He's got to this age, he's had a good innings. Well, he's likely to die. The average is 11 years and he's, now 10. He's going to die in a year anyway. Well, that's not necessarily correct. We now have a life table that can help us to predict how long they live. Yeah. So again, it's just unpicking these problems using big data on huge numbers of animals. And we can unpick it based on breed or based on the sex, the male, female, or the size of the dog, or whatever criteria we want. And it's really pretty fascinating.
That is mind-blowing. And I think people, this is good. We're influencing people's belief. We've had comments saying, good goodness, this is insightful, poignant, brilliant live. So let's just stay slightly out of the OA realm at the moment and use this as an opportunity to talk about stuff that I know that you're hugely passionate about. And I really wanted to give you airspace to talk more about this, because I think it is things that people need to understand when choosing what companion they're going to have in their life. What kind of other stuff have you been in? Because you've released 2 quite potent papers recently. One went down really well. One caused a bit of backlash, didn't it? So do you want to talk about them?
Yeah, so breeds, we've said earlier, breeds are wonderful, right? And people get invested in breeds, and you can get strange emotional things happening and different levels of bond with your breed, conviction that it's the right choice, confirmation bias where you want to be told it's the right choice. Then other people end up kind of grief-stricken or conscious-stricken because they've made a bad choice, whatever the breed is, if things turn out badly. So one of the things in the UK we have is, and in fact it's all over the world, is a brachycephalic crisis. So these are like the most beautiful dogs from the dog's point of view, personality-wise. So French bulldogs, pugs, and bulldogs, right? They're but obviously you can have rogues in every breed, but by and large, these are beautiful dogs and people love them. They bond with them. Unfortunately, over the last maybe 10 years, there's been a phenomenal rise in the popularity of these breeds, often driven by, we think, social media, advertising. And then once the bubble starts to grow and people start getting interested in these breeds, other advertisers pile in, just basically trying to hijack the popularity to sell their products. And this has led to a crisis all over the world. It's not just in the UK, where the previous kind of low level of these breeds became totally superseded, and everyone starts breeding them. Lots of these dogs are bred across Europe and then hauled across Europe and sold as puppies into the UK. Some horrendous welfare issues related to their breeding, issues around fertility clinics trying to force animals to breed that may not intrinsically have good breeding fertility in themselves. So the whole welfare issue is huge. In the UK, that's led to a working group called the Brachycephalic Working Group that's been set up to somehow try and help deal with this. And more and more and more over time, we're starting to realize that actually it's you, the listener out there, that has the power to do something about this. It's the general public in the decisions we make. So the Brachycephalic Working Group is kind of three main pillars that we would encourage the public to take note of. The first one is that the high demand for these breeds is leading to huge welfare issues related to the intrinsic health issues of the dogs themselves, but also to how they're bred. And in fact, I probably shouldn't even say breeders, I should say farmers, because when we think of breeders, we're thinking of, the really good people who love their dogs and dote on them and want to breed the next Crufts winner. Well, they're a minority. They're tiny in the big scheme of things. Maybe 2% of dogs are ever shown. The majority of these breeds are bred by farmers, just people who breed dogs to sell for profit. And that might be breeding them in the UK or elsewhere, but tomorrow, if brachycephalic dogs stop being popular and some other breed, the Chihuahua or the Corgi or whatever, became popular, they would just switch to them. There's no bond with the dogs. They're just farm animals. They just happen to be dogs that they're farming. So the first thing that we would say to everyone is to stop and think before buying a flat-faced dog. And that's the mantra. It's really, it's not telling people what to do. It's saying, think about it. There's severe welfare issues intrinsically within some of these breeds, within the wider pet population, often because of the way they're bred and the extreme conformation they're bred towards. And there's extreme welfare issues in how they're bred. So really, should you be feeding into that? The second thing is the dogs that already exist. And this is really almost your osteoarthritis, the CAM approach. These dogs that already exist that have all these problems move from lack of awareness to awareness that the problems exist. And then perceive that they're harming the dogs, and then live the life the dog is living. Feel that dog's pain, like Hannah was talking about with dogs with bad teeth. Feel the pain, and then do something about it. So take very good care of those dogs. Go to your veterinary surgeon. And then
because we are allowed to do that now. I'm just going to butt in there. I can remember very early in university or when I was in college, there was a real push to not anthropomorphize. In that, we went through an era where we were told you cannot put your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings on that animal. That is not what they're feeling. You do not know that. And you were almost like, really put down and as being too emotive if you behaved like that. And there's been a real swing in years gone past in that. I was even saying to a vet nurse today, if we think there could be pain, we treat for pain. We don't hesitate. If you, and I can remember being taught in the last 10 years, if it would be painful for you to have that procedure done to yourself, then consider it painful. Our ability to observe and monitor pain in animals is poor. So we need to do the right thing. And that's been a massive pendulum swing, hasn't it?
Absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. I graduated in '87 in Dublin. So that was a very farming-oriented veterinary education. And you very much were not, and you weren't putting yourself inside the animal, feeling as the animal does. I would argue now that even with that swing, I don't think we almost anthropomorphize enough. I think sometimes we still stand back, and it's just it's an animal and the animal is limping. Isn't that interesting? It's almost dispassionately looking at an animal instead of stepping inside and thinking, golly, there's a reason this animal is limping. It's in pain. So I'm not even sure we do it enough. But you're right, that there was that drive that we shouldn't do that it's an animal. And, when I first graduated, you were not to give pain relief to animals after neutering them, after spaying them. Because if you give pain relief, they'll run around and then maybe the stitches will burst. It was almost frowned upon because the pain was good. It kept these animals quiet. And you look back on that and you think, golly, that was horrendous. But somehow, and it goes back to the comment I said earlier that there isn't a truth. Somehow that was the truth, but it was our internal accepted, believed truth. The outside truth is the animals were suffering no differently to how they're suffering today after a spay. In fact, probably worse because maybe the suture materials were worse or bigger or whatever. We were using catgut. But, the truth was the same out there. We could never know it. But in our heads, we believed we were doing the right thing. The truth is the big picture with all the pieces of jigsaw on it that we create in our head. And we're just creating a different picture now to what we did before. So
Can I tangent there? Right. Let me just tangent a little bit to go back to OA and make anybody who's listening feel hopefully more comfortable. I would say on a daily basis, I change someone's truth at least once a day. And the guilt that comes with a sudden truth change is really, really, it's harsh. And anybody that's listening that's recently had a diagnosis of OA and that realize that it's been established in their dog for a while, and behavior changes and physical changes and capability and gait changes that they'd considered were just part of aging or typical for that dog, and now they realize actually they were pain related. Don't beat yourself up. We've all done it. You've just heard Dan saying when he was straight out of uni, he was doing bitch spays with no pain relief for them to go home because that was the truth at the time. So don't beat yourselves up. Sorry, continue.
No, you're exactly correct. So I would say you said you change somebody's mind every day. I don't even think you can. I think what the person is doing is changing their mind, and you're almost facilitating the process.
Yes.
Yeah. So
God, can I be called the facilitator? That sounds really bad. I love Phil.
So, you're a real badass, the facilitator. It's better than being flitty, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's way better than being flitty.
Yeah, flitty. Flitty is a good. You're never going to make the Hollywood movie using flitty as your name.
No, facilitator's right up there.
Facilitator is pretty cool. But no, that's exactly it. And then afterwards, the way to look at that, and I'd say I look back on some of the things I would have done when I was first in practice. And it's now I look back and I think it's horrendous. I used to do large animal practice in Wales. And, some of the things you do in farm practice or you did 20 years ago in farm practice, it's horrendous now I look back on it. Those bitches and dogs, neutered without pain relief. Well, that's horrendous. However, it's called presentism. It's something I've learned from Alison Skipper. She's a veterinary historian, and I just learned so much off her. So one of the things Alison is talking about from a historian's point of view is that we look at the world with our current knowledge base and we judge it based upon that. Well, that's not a productive way to do things. You need to take yourself back to where you were then with the knowledge you had then and think, was I actively setting out to make those bitches suffer unnecessarily? Or was I doing something that I believed was good, as in that the bitches wouldn't run around and they wouldn't burst their stitches, right? So this whole presentism effect is really powerful. So that person that you've helped them to realize their dog is suffering from osteoarthritis and in pain, they need to avoid this presentist approach where they're thinking, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. My dog's been in pain for a year and it's my fault. That's not a healthy or a good or useful way to go forward. The trick is almost to think, well, this is really good. I have finally realized it. And now we can move forward.
So I think that's really important as well, because it plays into one of the biggest obstacles for veterinary intervention of OA currently is there is a belief in the vet sector that owners are not that bothered. And I've had that said to me so many times. I've just been to a working group about OA and numerous people on the board were like, but do owners care? You know, I've had so many come in and I say to them, actually, your dog's moving badly, it's mildly limping, it's got posture change, behavior changes, this is likely to be underlying pain. Oh, no, he's all right. And they leave. That's the same, because that owner doesn't have the tools and the knowledge to know. They're working on what they know and they think that their dog's okay. And it's so important that we remember this, but how we manage it, I don't know.
It is difficult. It is difficult because you are trying to move somebody along that lack of awareness, perception. But when I was in practice, my nurses, I had some fabulous nurses. They were really strong on animal welfare, like really, really strong. And they would often get really irate with some of the clients who weren't, you know, as you just said, somebody who wouldn't acknowledge pain. Well, and they're, you know, they would say, this is terrible, you know, this client's really bad. They must really hate their animal. They're not doing treatment. Well, if you stand back, those are the clients who are coming into your veterinary practice. By definition, they're already good clients. Mm-hmm. So they're bringing their animal to see you. So to glibly say that somebody who doesn't recognize pain is a really bad owner, that's just not correct or safe. These are good owners. They care for their animals. They just don't happen to see the world the way you see it. So I don't know if you take exercise, Hannah, but somebody who's mad on exercise might look at you and you're slobbing out, you know, with your kind of skull or whatever, watching Netflix, you know, doing your flitty bit or whatever, not facilitating. And, you know, then I'd say that Hannah, she just has no respect for her health and welfare. But actually, that might be your perception of how I keep myself healthy. I chill, I relax, you know, and I think about my next flitty new job or whatever, you know. So in other words, we're judging other people based upon our perception of the world, but actually their perception may be different. And in humans, we have a wonderful protective mechanism where we rewrite the past. You know, always we look back and, you know, by and large, the past was good and the summers were warmer and there was better snow in the winter and everything was perfect. And currently it's appalling, you know, the world's falling apart. And as you said, Ukraine and this train strikes and COVID and everything. But that a lot of that in 5 or 10 years' time, we'll probably look back to now and think, actually, it wasn't so bad. Mm-hmm. You know, it was quite nice and I made some new friends and we recreate our emotions over time. Well, that's a human protective mechanism. Well, for somebody who has a dog and deep down they might know that dog is in trouble, but a protective mechanism might be to say, no, he's fine, he's really good. Mm-hmm. Because maybe they're worried that if they admit the dog is in trouble, you might insist or request the dog is euthanized because he's in so much pain. So we're sticking all our logic and our beliefs and our perceptions on a worldview of somebody else who is looking at, okay, it's the same dog they're looking at, but they're looking at it from a very different perspective with a very different set of history behind them and personal experience, and they're making a different judgment call. But we haven't really got any right to say that their judgment call is worse than ours. You know, who knows, it may be better. As I say, 20 years ago, I was spaying bitches and not giving them pain relief. Well, who am I to say somebody else's judgment call is good or bad?
Mm-hmm. No, and I think it's so important. And I was trying to kind of in my head go, some of these, when you start thinking like this, it can be quite inhibitory, and you can sit there thinking, well, if I have to always accept that other person's perception of the truth at that time is what they see, I can't blame them. I can't be angry at them. I can't force them. And what am I doing with this stuff in my head? How can I get out of this swamp of, I can't be angry at you. I can't push you into. It can create compassion in yourself to keep going. And I was thinking to myself, how do I use the knowledge that I have that the person that I'm talking to in that room isn't on the same page as me? And how can I not allow it to frustrate me and make me want to give up? Actually, it does the reverse for me. It gives me compassion to their journey and gives me the ability to find a bit more time and a bit more words. And that's, I guess, how I've spun it around in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. And compassion is a really good word. It's really powerful. It's like shared emotion, shared love. In addition, one of the other ways around that is not to have this as a conflict, two different opinions. What you end up doing is you align the opinions. You say, well, the owner and me are both the same in that our primary focus is the dog's welfare. Now, right now, this minute, we're coming at that from a slightly different perspective, but it's all about the animal, right? So we set that as our start point. The next point is we move away from discussing your opinion and my opinion, because opinions are a little bit like armpits, right? We all
I love it.
but nobody else wants to smell your armpit, so you can keep your opinion, right?
Oh, I'm going to use that.
So basically, keep your armpits to yourself, but instead move to what we are all happy to share. And the one thing we're all happy to share is good evidence. And that's the world I live in, the whole evidence base. So it's you and I, owner, you and I, we have a dog. Let's look at the evidence. The evidence says dogs that are limping have pain. Dogs that are limping will have a better quality of life if the pain's controlled. Let's move towards the evidence and discuss the evidence. Now, all of a sudden, you're in the same spot as the owner. You've moved position, or you've moved the owner to you. And now you're rocking and rolling with that discussion. But it's all based on evidence. You've got to take opinion and belief out of it, including your own. And that's what I've learned. One of the key things I have to do is jettison my beliefs and my opinions, because they will absolutely crucify me, because I will start going down my line, which is not evidence. So there's a thing called the evidence pyramid. They use it in epidemiology all the time. It's this pyramid where at the very top we have the best evidence. So that's systematic reviews or randomized control trials. You know, the studies you were talking about earlier, the clinical trials. And then you go down and down and down, and we have cohort studies and case control studies and case studies. But the very bottom of the evidence pyramid, the very weakest evidence, is
opinion.
Expert opinion, not even opinion, expert opinion, right? Because expert opinion is worse than opinion, right? Because if I'm just somebody who doesn't know very much about something, I might go and seek other people's opinion, and I'll take what's called the wisdom of the crowd. I'll speak to 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and I'll come somewhere in the middle. If I'm an expert, that usually means I've forged my own line, and to be an expert, I probably don't want to be saying the same as everybody else, because that's not really it. You need to be a little bit different, right? So the very bottom is expert opinion, right? And that's why I said earlier, one of the things I have to do is jettison my own opinion and accept that I am probably wrong. And once you accept that, it's a real comfortable place to be. So I know, this is my belief, I know everything, absolutely everything that I say, including this statement, is wrong. Right? And the reason it's wrong is that no matter how close I get to what I believe is the truth, I could always add another decimal place to that level of precision. Right? So I'm never quite there. And also, even if I am there and I'm absolutely correct, bang on the money, tick, 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 that's 3 seconds later, the world is a different place, everybody's thinking differently, my answer is already out of date, so it's now wrong. It's an old piece of information. And once you get there, it's a very comfortable place to be, because now you're no longer tied to your beliefs. In fact, it's the opposite. You're saying, I'm okay with this. I'm fluid in my beliefs. Let's work with the evidence. And there's no challenge between you and me, Mr. Owner. So, and that works really well. And most people are happy to go down that line, but they're not happy to have their opinion battered by your opinion.
Yes, I agree. And I think we have lots of people approach us on a regular basis, professionals saying, I just don't know how to handle this situation, or I feel I'm butting my heads, or, you know, I just can't get on the same page as an owner. And I think that's a brilliant tip to say, you know, right, what do we agree on? We agree that we want this dog to have the best quality of life for as long as possible. Let's start there, and then let's see where we go. We're running on. I've got a couple of questions that are topic related, some OA, some a bit more breed related. This one is the Kennel Club responsible for certain looks in brachy dogs?
It's a really good question, actually, because the Kennel Club keeps seeming to be the center of this whole dog thing, right? So basically, the dogs that exist at the moment exist because we've bought them. So if nobody bought, you've got a Labrador maybe here, or a Jack Russell Terrier or a French Bulldog, there wouldn't be any there. So the Kennel Club aren't buying these dogs and plopping them down in millions of houses around the world. It's us. So actually, if there is a responsibility, we'll come back to that word in a second, right? If there is a responsibility, then it rests with us, the public. And that's you, Hannah, and it's me, and it's everybody out there listening, right? That's the first thing. Second thing is, you notice I like words, right? Responsible. So responsible is probably the wrong word. Responsible is a blame word, and responsible is something that I choose to accept. So I can choose to be responsible for something. What we're actually probably meaning here is accountable. Accountable is an externally applied pressure. So we might say the Kennel Club might be accountable for it, but it would be the Kennel Club themselves that would say whether they were responsible, whether they accepted it, right? And I would say, actually, we need to move on from that. Third thing, this is me being really, really picky here, right? This question is a binary question. Yeah, the question is now in epidemiology you learn to be careful in your questioning style. So this is the Kennel Club responsible? So the answer is either yes or no. You'll see it if you watch Law and Order or some of these legal programs, you know, and the lawyer will batter down the person that's answering the questions. Yes, tell me, yes, no, did you see X person doing something, right? The world is much more complex than that. So even if there is levels of accountability, it's proportional. It's what level of the responsibility or of the accountability rests with X, Y, and Z. And I would say actually the biggest power rests with us, the public. The Kennel Club is a registering system. The Kennel Club is really focused on registering dogs, on the health of dogs, obviously on showing dogs, on promoting different breeds, on giving us good information on different breeds. The Kennel Club does lots of wonderful things. So I don't think it's as simple as this.
No, and I think you gave me some really weird, like scary figures about the amount of dogs that have, as you say, extreme breed characteristics that actually get to the show ring. And you were telling me the day before yesterday, it isn't for showing people are buying these dogs, you know, and it's what was you were trying to explain on that one?
So basically, this is about, so even with you had said about the two papers that have come out recently. We had a paper on pugs about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and then a paper on bulldogs last week. And this was comparing the health of each of those breeds versus all remaining dogs. And in a lot of the press, I was constantly getting asked these questions about who's to blame, and you know, is it the Kennel Club, and should we ban the breeds, etc. Right? But the reality is that is kind of missing the point. 2% of dogs in the UK, these are Kennel Club figures, 2% of dogs in the UK are used for showing. So when we're talking about the whole Crufts thing, it's 2% of dogs. Now, obviously, it's important. It's 2%. And for each one of those dogs, it's 100% of their individual life. So it is important. The showing world is kind of representative and promotes certain breeds. So that's important. But in the big scheme of things, it's 2% of dogs. The Kennel Club reckons about 30% of UK dogs are registered with the Kennel Club. But lots of those dogs aren't following breed standards necessarily. Yeah, they might have different colors that aren't breed standard. So that means we have 70% of dogs that are not registered with the Kennel Club, that are pet dogs, that are bred as pets, and a lot of them were farmed. So they were bred by people, humans, who are farming the dogs for sale, right? And that's fine. That's the way the world is. Dogs are a commodity until the point that they're bought by a family, and then suddenly they become a member of a family, and a highly important and valuable member. So it does mean that this whole thing of zooming in on the Kennel Club has no control whatsoever over that 70%, but yet lots of those will be brachycephalic. Therefore, how can we say the Kennel Club is responsible for dogs that are bred in Romania or Poland or Southern Ireland? And that's why that question, it's a very good question, but probably what we should be doing is thinking, instead of looking back and pointing fingers, all of us together, sitting together, looking forward and saying, how do we do something about this? Whether it's breeds that are prone to osteoarthritis, or breeds that are brachycephalic, or breeds with excessive skin folds, or whatever. It's about what can we do? And what we can do is A, change our pattern of buying certain breeds. So stop and think before buying a flat-faced dog. B, awareness of the health issues of dogs. So we're alert to them. At least we can go from non-awareness to awareness. We're alert to the top disorders. And then C, whatever breed we do buy, even within that breed, there will be variation. So even if I'm still convinced that I'm going to buy a bulldog, I can buy a bulldog with a tail, and a longer nose, and less skin folds. They are out there. I saw them. The Breed Council, the Bulldog Breed Council, have got some examples of dogs that are actually quite moderate. So they are out there. But it has to come from us, the public. We can't just sit back and blame breeders, whoever they are, or blame the Kennel Club. That's just passing the buck.
No, absolutely. And just going back to, comparing let's use the Bulldog from 20 years ago to now is quite dramatic. It feels like you're watching some kind of sci-fi movie. They're morphing. And I said this to an owner the other day. I said that everything that's in that dog is still in that dog, but it's just been misplaced. It's just been squished and pushed into tighter spaces. And their face was like, I never thought of it like that. And it's scary. I love Laura. Is there any research about health span as opposed to lifespan and how this could be measured?
Oh, this is a fabulous question. So this was one of my PhD supervisors was Paul McGreevy. At the time, he was at the University of Sydney. He's moved since. He was professor of animal welfare. And this was one of the concepts he was really, really strong on. So the concept is that we have a lifespan, so however long we live. And then within that lifespan, we have a component that is healthy, or whatever we deem as healthy. And then you hit a point when you say, I'm no longer healthy. I'm now into that final bit of life. Yeah. And that final bit of life can be quite long. We've started exploring that in VetCompass. The challenge that we have is that it's very difficult to define when you cross the threshold. And a lot of this has been done with humans. I did a chapter and I did some work with a human longevity group in the US. And the section I was working on that was exploring health span and lifespan in dogs, using dogs as models for humans. And it's really difficult because our definition of what's healthy varies dramatically as we age and as we hit different phases of life. So when I'm a 15-year-old, when I look at some ancient 30-year-old, right, this person is just ancient, they must surely be ready to die, because they're so old and they're falling apart. But then when I get to 30, I still feel the same young person. I'm looking at 40-year-olds and God, they're losing their hair, they're going gray, they're wearing glasses, their health is just the pits. It's like really bad. Then I hit 40 and I think, oh, I still feel like a young person. But God, those 50-year-olds, look at them. And so in other words, health span, when we get to the point, often we're now living in a new world with a new worldview and we accommodate. And we've also got lots of new good stuff, good experiences in life, good family behind us. And health span includes mental health as well. In the human world, they talk about physical, mental, and social health is included. The WHO puts that into their definition. So in other words, it's not just me and my own personal physical and mental health. It's who's around me, my family, my society, my friends.
How do you define that?
Yeah.
Is it the owner that defines it, or is it the person observing the owner that defines it? That's impossible.
It's really, really difficult. I went through a phase about 4 to 5 years ago. I started working on trying to define health itself. And I went to all the top bods in the big charities and the Kennel Club and the veterinary groups, and I asked each of them, define health. Now, some of them just told me, well, it's obvious, everyone knows that. And as soon as somebody says that, I know they don't know the answer, right? The other people would give me a definition. The WHO one is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. Yeah, so 0 diseases. And you kind of think, well, how does that one work? So every child that's born that wears glasses because they're a bit short-sighted, they're immediately not healthy. For the rest of their life, they're not healthy. Really? Is that kind of fair? So I went round and round the houses on this, and I've kind of come to the point of view that it's more complex than binary, the comment I made earlier. So that's why within the Brachy Working Group, I've been working on it for a few years. In the Brachy Working Group, we've released this concept of innate health, which is from an animal's perspective, a key concept. Just go on to the Brachy Working Group website and you'll see it. It's all written up and there's a nice infographic. And innate health says that animals should be born with the freedom and the capacity and the capability to do certain innate or natural characteristics. And these are earth-shattering, right? So this years and years of research gone into these, earth-shattering. They include being able to blink, being able to breathe, being able to mate, being able to give birth, being able to sleep without waking up to gasp, being able to go for a run without gasping. So this is like really basic stuff, controlling your body temperature in hot weather and cold weather. Like when you think about it, it's so obvious, right? But so many dogs are not born with those capacities. And it means for the rest of their life, they're not able to, whatever, sleep a good night without waking up to breathe. They're not able to run freely. And a lot of that is breed related. So therefore, once we go from lack of awareness to awareness that actually, heck, this is an innate health issue, that I have chosen a breed with X conformational extreme that prevents it from blinking fully because its eyes bulge and its eyelids won't close over the front. I can do something about that. The next time I buy a dog that doesn't have that extreme characteristic, either within the original breed, because I love that breed, or choose a different breed. So that question on health span is fascinating. The follow-on, it was Laura, wasn't it? Yeah. The follow-on, I would say to that is that another thing I've learned over the years is that the best learning comes in unpicking and trying to answer the question, not in the answer itself.
Yeah.
So you get your question and you unpick it, and you could write a book on that single question, right? And you've learned loads. Even though we might get to the end and say, actually, we can't answer the question. It's almost irrelevant. It's the fact that in the journey, education and learning and growth is actually a process. It's about the journey. It's never about getting to the destination. The answer itself doesn't really matter. It's how we change as we learn. And the reason that we change is that we open our mind to something new. We accept we don't know something, and we open our mind and we take in new information voluntarily. Which is why I said earlier, you can't stuff information into people's heads. They have to get in and create it themselves. So wonderful question, Laura.
Great question. Now I'm just looking at the time, so I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to call it a day. Partly because I'm supposed to now be on call, and the phones have gone over. Yes. So let's just do this one. Let's leave it on a happy note. Do you think joint scoring, DNA testing for diseases are influencing breed health?
Oh, Stacey, you're going to get in trouble here because this is a one that's contentious, right? So right, let's go there, right? Okay, I'm going to put my head on the block here, right? So there has been in dog breeding, and it's driven by vets. This isn't driven by the Kennel Club. This concept of health testing, and I think you said health scoring maybe there, but health testing, right? And we've had this concept around for over 50 years. There's 50 years of hip scoring. You know, it started in the 1960s with those original Hodgman papers from the BSAVA. And we have this concept of health testing, right? Now, I intrinsically have a huge problem with it. I had a huge problem with it when I was in practice. And as I gather more and more and more evidence, I haven't changed my view. I'm open to changing my view, but I haven't changed my view. There's huge issues with it, right? So the first issue, really simply, you've got it by now, words are really important, right? And when you put a word on something, you create a meaning. There was a guy called Vygotsky, a Russian guy, and he was having these battles with Piaget, another psychologist, and they were saying, which comes first, the meaning or the words? And the jury is kind of out, but I think once you put a word on something, you create a meaning, yeah? So basically, we call it health testing. So by calling it health testing, we've created a meaning. It means we're testing the animal's health, and we're not. And when you think about it, you go, duh, that was quite obvious, because actually what we're doing is we're disorder testing. So an animal that is health tested, whether it's for hips or elbows or whatever DNA test you're doing, by calling it health testing, it means if it passes the test, it's healthy because I've done a health test. Well, heck, animals have hundreds, thousands of different disorders. So just the fact that I didn't come up positive on one of those 100 or 1,000 different disorders does not mean I'm healthy. So that's my first point. I have a huge issue with the title and the name. Second thing is the concept was brought in as a concept. We will health test and we will launch this process, hip scoring, whatever it is, just going back to the osteoarthritis because Hannah's involved, hip scoring and elbow scoring. We will launch this process, right? But dogs vary. We said it earlier. They go from a 1 kilogram Chihuahua to a 100 kilogram Great Dane, right? They may as well be different species. If I hopped off the UFO from Mars and I saw a Chihuahua and a Great Dane, there's no way I'm going to say both of those are the same species. They're not. They're two different species, right? So basically, we're applying a single test to both of those breeds, and we're assuming that the same test, the same X-ray, will give us the same reliable result in both dogs, right? And it won't. It plainly does not. And we apply the same rules for hip scoring in a bulldog's hips and in a Labrador's hips. Well, those hips intrinsically are differently shaped, right? So they will need different scoring systems. So I have huge issues with all of that. The third one is that you've talked about a DNA test, right? And as soon as a condition, somebody identifies a single gene and there's a DNA test, there's a drive to test dogs for that disorder. Well, that is intrinsically poor for the dogs if it's just applied like that. Because let's imagine it's hip scoring. And the idea is that we don't breed from any dogs with a hip score above the median, right? So that means on every generation of breeding animals, we're chucking out half of them based upon a hip score. Well, that's half, and every 4 years or 2 years or whatever the intergenerational interval is, we're halving our breeding pool based upon these X-rays that may or may not be predictive of the next generation for hips alone. But look at the harm we're doing to the genetic diversity. The complexity is huge. So I think a lot of these health tests, we need to go back and think about the breed and treat them all as separate species. Look at the top disorders in that breed from a welfare perspective, duration, severity, and frequency, and then decide which one of them, or maybe it's several of them, we want to prioritize for control. What we shouldn't do is start with what DNA test is available and say, just because it's available, I'm going to use it. And I'm going to decimate my breeding pool based upon a DNA test that probably was never validated in this breed. It was validated in some other breed, in some other country, and may not even be doing what it's meant to be doing in my breed. So anyway, I've stuck my head above the parapet.
I like it.
Severe issues I have with health testing.
No, but I think from a simpler mind, it is really fascinating that we're trying to breed out one thing, but we're actually likely creating problems by, as you say, reducing the size of that breed pool dramatically. But again, we're all learning. And when these health schemes were set up, they were set up with best intention to solve problems that were very prevalent and causing suffering at the time. So I think a definite take home is that we've got to be really adaptive, and we've got to be reassessing the protocols that we have in place and deciding with current knowledge whether they are as effective. But then that brings a whole realm of issues of change. People hate change.
People hate change, exactly.
People hate change. People go, dude, I've just established how to do this. You now tell me not to do it like this and do it like this, or not even do it at all. Whoa, humans, we're tough.
We're tough, but even if you look in practice, that's what we do all the time. We have, QI, this quality improvement, and the whole thing is you keep assessing. It's a clinical audit cycle. You assess what it is you're assessing. You see how you got on. You compare yourself against a benchmark of where you want to be. You make some changes. You then assess again. And the process needs to continually change, but in a structured way and in a set direction.
And I agree. Because I didn't actually really start learning about that again until I started writing some kind of lectures specifically on things like supplements, of taking people back to evidence. And when you want to do, best practice and fall into recognized veterinary practice, geez, man, we need time. I got to do my StreamYard live here at 7:16 because I ran upstairs from work. So it's another one of those situations where the intention is good. God damn, it's hard.
It is tough, and it is a constant battle, but I think we do need to be gentle on ourselves. We do the best we can. If it's not, it's the comment we made earlier, if something we've done in the past wasn't ideal, you didn't do it on purpose, you didn't set out to be poor. If what we're doing now isn't ideal, so long as we're open to change, and that's really the main message. Just keep your mind. They often say, just keep your skull open, just not so open that your brain falls out. But keep open to new ideas and keep open.
And taking it back to OA and ending on that point, I can honestly say, in the 10 years I've been obsessed, the changes that are being taking place are huge. They're huge. and people's understanding and concepts and challenging the way that we manage this disease is happening on a biannual basis. And that gives me a lot of hope that we're going to better manage this disease. We're going to identify it earlier. And hopefully over time, there will be a knock-on effect where breeds will not be as predisposed to certain joint conditions that lead to OA. Right, now, lovely Lynn, and you've had some lovely questions. I would encourage you to go and join Holly's Army. My lovely Canvastor Lynn Hancock will give you the address. So a lot of the questions that you're asking tonight, we've covered in so many lives before, and there's lives specifically about feeding and about supplements, etc. So please do go and tap into the resources that we have. I want to say thank you to Big Barker for being our sponsor this year. It's really fantastic to have them on board. We really wouldn't be here without them. So high five, Big Barker. And what an awesome dude Dan O'Neill is. I can listen to you for hours. You've got such a good tone and calm, and you just suck it in. It's fantastic. We will get you back. We always do. So thank you very much, guys, for listening, and we will see you next week for more Cam Lives. Till then, see you later.
Bye.